Welcome to another episode of Civic Cipher. I am your host, Ramses Ja. Big shout out to Q Ward, who is off this week, but that's all right because true to form, we are going to bring you all the things that you may know and certainly some of the things that you don't know about life in Black and Brown America, and hopefully give you some perspective and create better allies and more empowered individuals. Got a great show in store for you today, so be sure to stick around because my guest is the one, the only Queen YoNasDa. And we're definitely going to get into all of her activism, past and present, and maybe even some things that she's planning for the future if she's willing to let that out on the show here today. Also, we're going to really stand in solidarity with our Native brothers and sisters today, which is something that we don't often get to do here, but it's something that we very much enjoy doing. Obviously, there's a lot of things that affect Indigenous folks and Indigenous communities. And when we can share this platform with our brothers and sisters from those communities, we very much enjoy that. Later on in the show, of course, our Way Black History Fact, we're going to be taking a look at the history of Indigenous Peoples Day, of course, with the help of our guest, Queen YoNasDa. And so plenty to stick around for on today's episode of Civic Cipher. Now, with all that in mind, I think it's time for us to really get into our guest today a little bit more. So let's talk about... before we get to that, let's talk about some ebony excellence. How do you feel about that?
That's great.
Okay. So, Queen.
Yes.
Is there someone that you know that deserves today's moment of celebration for their ebony excellence?
You know, there's so many, but I want to shout out Portia Williams from Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Okay.
The reason why I want to shout her out, because if those that have watched Real Housewives of Atlanta, you know, at the beginning of Portia's career, she asked, wanted to know if the actual Underground Railroad was actually a train track, you know.
Wow. Okay.
And so, a lot of people thought she was ditzy and very uneducated, even though she's the granddaughter of a civil rights Hosea Williams. She's the granddaughter of Hosea.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And but I met Portia last summer.
Okay.
And after I organized a huge march in Atlanta, Georgia, at the CNN building in solidarity for George Floyd. And she reached out to me and she DM'd me and said, I want to go everywhere you go.
How about that?
And she said, I love what you're doing. And so that day, I actually was meeting with the mayor's office in Atlanta, Georgia, with the help of T.I.
Okay.
And I said, you know what? Come with me to this meeting. So she came with me to the meeting, and so educated. She had all of the demands from a lot of the activists and community people that she reached out to of demands to present to the mayor. Mind you, she was not prepped for this meeting.
Okay.
She prepped herself.
Right.
And ever since then, Portia has been on the front lines for human rights. Portia was right there getting arrested. In Louisville, Kentucky, when we was bringing awareness on Breonna Taylor.
Okay.
Portia is, she's like, use me. And not just with myself as an activist, but as well as so many activists. She's like, use me to bring awareness on what's happening because I have a platform. So I want to shout out my sister in the movement, Portia from Real Housewives of Atlanta, that is using her platform and her celebrity, to be able to make a difference.
Absolutely. I love that. And that certainly is an example of ebony excellence if I've ever heard of it. So well done, Portia. And
Yes.
Certainly someone to model yourself after.
Yes.
Certainly if you aren't as familiar with your history or with how we got to where we are, it's those folks that really take the reins of their own lives and their own education and really do the deep dive and then are motivated to do something with that information that are celebrated around here. So once again,
Yes.
hats off to Portia.
Shout out to Portia.
So now I know this is a bit unorthodox because we haven't really done a formal introduction of you just yet.
Yes.
And I think now is the time to do that.
Okay.
But before we get there, I want to talk about how you got to being you. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, your mother raised you up
Yes.
in this way.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your mother, if we may.
Yeah.
YoNasDa
LoneWolf was an amazing motivational speaker, activist, organizer. She's from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. She's Ogallala Lakota. She ended up being the first Native American to work for NBC. So she went through the residential school, the boarding school, horror, of that. And then NBC was looking on the reservations and seeing anyone that had a bachelor's degree in mass communications, and my mother did. Sure. And so she was like, this is an opportunity to get off the res and go to the concrete jungle of New York. When she was in New York, she met Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
And Muhammad Ali and Don King offered her a job to be the public relations director for Don King Enterprises. So she was the woman, the PR, the marketing behind the Thriller of Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle. It's not like Muhammad Ali needed the help, but it wasn't just him. It was my mother that helped put together, and she also put together I don't know if you remember a major concert that happened in Africa during I believe it was the Rumble in the Jungle. And it was Cecilia Cruz, and then it was James Brown, and it was all of these people.
I do remember. Yep.
My mom organized that and put that all to help put that together. Okay. Because that was also around the time of Muhammad Ali's fight. Okay. And so she is working for Muhammad Ali, and then that's when she met the Honorable Ms. Louis Farrakhan. Okay. And so she met my father. My father is Black from Brooklyn, New York, a fine artist. But what my mother did not know was the fact that he used to get money illegally in different various ways. Right. And so from there, she was on the run from the feds. Ooh. Because of association or her tie with my father. Okay. And because he ended up going to federal prison. So at this time, Muhammad Ali has retired. And now she's on the run from the feds. And so Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, reached out to my mother and said, I want you to help me to be able to engage and have Native Americans, to come and what we can do to support, to create that alliance between Black and Native people. Because what a lot of people do not know or do know in the Nation of Islam teachings, it talks about how the original people are Black and Native American here, and not one and the same, but the original people are Black and Native, and that we have to be able to unite and understand each other, in that way, and our unity is very important, especially here in North America. And so my mother, now helping the Honorable Ms. Louis Farrakhan rebuild the Nation of Islam from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of that time. So of course, the FBI was on. Oh yeah, all over that. Huh? Yeah. So he ended up moving us here to Phoenix, Arizona in 1983, 84. We ended up coming here. And I remember as a child living on South Phoenix, seeing guys in suits following me to school in their car, and I was like, who are these people? And my mom teaching me what a bug was, that was maybe in the house or something like that. Yeah. And so I learned very, very early about surveillance and COINTELPRO. And my mother ended up working with the Minister Farrakhan, but also General Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Wow. Yeah. And because Muammar Gaddafi had a huge love affair for all indigenous people, especially in North America, Canada, and Latin South America, and the Caribbean. He believed that with our power and our unity and our influence, that if we had some financial backing, we can be able to build our own and have our own, and that Native American tribes don't have to beg this government for funding. We could also, being sovereign, we could practice that sovereignty and get funding from international resources. So it was people like Clyde Belcourt and Russell Means and my mother and so many warrior women, Chief Ernie Longwalker, that was going out to Libya. And my mom was the woman behind organizing all of these Native Americans and Mexican, Mexicans and other Latino indigenous people from South America to go to Libya. How about that? So they was going to these indigenous conferences. While that was happening, FBI was huge on finding out, okay, what is going on here? Because if we remember in the 80s, Gaddafi was America's #1 enemy. Yeah. And then Gaddafi was giving out money to a lot of organizations, from the Black Panthers to other organizations all across the United States. So people are getting money left and right from Gaddafi in the 80s. And so the FBI went to my mother, because she already did 2 years from the prior offense with my father. But she did 6 months in jail. And so now she's on, I think, probation or something like that.
Okay.
And they went to my mother, and they was like, we would like for you to be an informant for us against the Honorable Ms. Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And because we're trying to shut this down. We're trying to shut down the Nation of Islam. Okay. This is during the time in South Phoenix. There's a huge house of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's, which is called the Phoenix Palace. Okay. And my mother and my Aunt Maria were the ones rebuilding this Phoenix Palace. And then next to it is a small house called the Indian House. Okay. So they was rebuilding this. And so my mother was like, no, I am not going to be an informant, and she was just like, no, I'm not. So what they did, they ended up getting in it an FBI agent to act undercover, to act like a construction worker. And she's paying these construction workers, she's paying them with her checking account. And so they came to her and said, you know what? You are looking at 4 years in prison, 4 to 7 years in prison, because of the fact that you are on probation. You're not supposed to have a checking account. And so my mother ended up going, it was a huge trial in Vegas, and my mother ended up doing 7 years in prison. Wow. She did those 7 years because she would not be an informant. She would not go against her values. 10 toes down.
All the way down.
So I'm going to try to make this fast, but I'm working on trying to get a movie made on my mom's life.
Yeah, you should.
But what happened was that so Honorable Ms. Louis Farrakhan adopted me and my brother. Mm-hmm. We left here, Phoenix, Arizona, and went out to Chicago. And I was raised by the Honorable Ms. Louis Farrakhan in Chicago, and his family, they're all their aunts, uncles, he's grandpa to me, or pop.
Yeah, I knew this part.
Yeah, he's that. And so when my mother came out of prison, at Fort Worth, Texas, she was in a federal penitentiary in Fort Worth, Texas. When she came back here to Arizona, she went straight into behavioral health and trying to get Native Americans off of drugs and alcohol. And as well, it was a huge gang culture in the 90s, Sure. And so with that, she was using that same activism, that same fears, that organizing and all of that, to be able to go into health and wellness for Black and Brown and Native people here locally, and not just locally, but also regionally and then later nationally. She was a part of making sure that we had a Native, Dr. Martin Luther King holiday here in Phoenix, Arizona, and that tie was because she already had a lot of friends in the sports industry. She went to the two opposing teams for the Super Bowl and said, you all boycott this. So if both of you all, the two teams, boycott Arizona coming to the Super Bowl, that you will not play unless there's a Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, and so because of her sport, knowledge with Muhammad Ali and all of that, that was we made it happen. And then from there, she ended up becoming president of Native American Recognition Days here. Here in Phoenix, Arizona. She was working for, now it's called Native Connections. At the time, it was Indian Rehabilitation Center. Now Native Connections is a huge behavioral health center for Native Americans here locally in Arizona. And so she was a part of the growth of that, and she started the Children of Color Parade with the city of Phoenix and a lot of other programming. And my mother passed of lung cancer in 2003. Okay. And but she gave us, I would say she gave the city of Phoenix grace and beautiful preparation for that, because during that time the Arizona Republic followed her entire journey while she was battling lung cancer. So amazing
absolutely
shoes to fill.
I'm so glad I asked that question. I really feel like because I knew that your mother was someone who was extremely influential, but I didn't know to what degree.
Yeah.
So that certainly helps establish the legacy of you, Queen YoNasDa.
Yes.
And so, you know, and I want to take a moment. We just got picked up in Spokane, Washington.
Yes.
KYRS FM. And we just got picked up in Rochester as well, Detroit more recently. We've made announcements on our social media. So a lot of cities that, you know, truth told, all of these lands were once belonged to indigenous people.
Yes.
Some would argue should still belong to, you know, with the whole land back movement and all that.
Exactly.
And I don't want to pigeonhole you at all, but I want to set you up because I really need people to know who are listening to this show that haven't heard about you, haven't seen you. I need them to know the caliber of guest we have here today. So let me start. Now, I will say this. I have known Queen YoNasDa for many years as a broadcaster, where we both once lived in Phoenix, Arizona. You now reside in Atlanta, where Q is. But as a longtime broadcaster, she's been on the radio with me before. But also at different events on the streets having to do with, it could be voter registration, you know, events related to indigenous populations, black populations, and so forth.
Hip hop
as well. Hip hop as well. Absolutely. Shout out to Capadonna. One time. And the whole Wu-Tang Clan too.
Yes.
But now, in the past, I'd say maybe, certainly the last 10 years, but longer than that, just a national presence. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
The movement that you've made. I've seen you for the Dakota Access Pipeline on the ground up there. Of course, in Atlanta. We're going to talk about all the stuff that you've done in Atlanta. I want to say Ahmaud Arbery, when his family, before they went to the media, I think they went to you, right? That was in, where was that based?
In Georgia.
That was in Georgia. Okay. And these neat, not neat, but these little moments that kind of create the timeline that has led up to 2020 last year, and then, you know, on into today, and then of course into the future. But these little events that kind of was the groundswell leading up to George Floyd. You were there on the front lines, talking to the cameras with all these people, and you represented Black women. You never not that. Indigenous women. Never not that. And I believe your background is a Muslim woman. Yes. And so never that never took a backseat either. And that's such a powerful intersection of people who have had, I'll put it kindly, challenges in this country. And in my opinion, not only have you handled it with grace and all these opportunities that you have to go and counsel families or deal with, you know, political, you know, in the political arena, or engage with politics, or, you know, create reform or whatever it is that you're doing, but also moving with a firm hand, because a lot of times that's very important. And so I didn't want to tell your story, but I feel like I got a good amount of it, but I know I left a lot off the table too.
It's beautiful.
So you did mention, you know, you have a background, you know, related to hip hop. I'd love for you to talk about that a bit before we go into some of the work that you're doing now.
So the day I fell in love with hip hop,
let's talk about it.
Was, you know, when my mother was on the run from the feds.
Okay.
You know, there was a period she did go on a run. So that's why I always say I'm from everywhere. But, you know, we was in LA, Venice Beach, and I'm seeing, it was Rocksteady Crew West Coast. And I'm seeing them just being free with this music that sounds so revolutionary. Now, mind you, you know, the climate. Now, my mother was freedom fighter, run from the feds. We're around, major freedom fighters, Kwame Ture, Cesar Chavez. The list goes on and on. Jesse Jackson, so many people. So I'm a young girl. This is before social media.
Okay.
My mom didn't give me the iPad.
Yeah.
My experience was being at the couch, being at the foot of all of these elders and just listening to them talk about how they're going to change the world.
Sure.
And so they're older than me, but I saw people that were around my age that was also being very revolutionizing a new culture and talking about it, but in a hip hop form of things that I'm hearing Minister Farrakhan talk about, that I'm hearing Cesar Chavez talk about, the list goes on. And I'm like, wow, and it's to a beat. I love hip hop,
Yeah.
That's how I fell in love with hip hop, because it was relatable to what I was going through.
And there's another part of this too, is that in all of your interactions on the ground,
Yes.
maybe not all, but certainly in a good number that I've seen over the years. Of course, I can't name all the names, just, some of the incidents will escape me. But you've managed to continue to not only cultivate your relationship with hip hop, but also compel these artists to come and contribute and be a part of it. You mentioned T.I. earlier, and I know that you have a very storied history with the Wu-Tang Clan and so forth.
Yeah.
So
it's important. It's really important, because like I said, I gravitated towards hip hop because I was in the movement. I'm a movement baby, and so, but then that vice versa, that has to flip around. As we know, rap music is a reflection. It's the news of the hood.
Yeah,
it's now it's the news of the barrio. It's the news of the res. It's the news of Japan and all everywhere, know. Yeah. And so, but the culture of hip hop is now a baby version of culture of whatever demographic we come from,
Sure.
And so I started rapping. I released 2 albums. I went on tour with Wu-Tang Clan. I went on tour with Red and Meth. And I was on the Rock the Bells tour, did some of the dates on the Rock the Bells tour, opening up for Red and Meth, in Immortal Technique. I did some stuff with him. And every opportunity I got, I was like, y'all need to come and speak here, or and I always was pushing on them to not just use their influence in music, but also to get back to using that same influence to make differences. Make a change. Make a change. And I'm a huge advocate on that. And artists that do not want to do that, I don't care who you are. If you don't want to do that, then I don't deal with you.
Yeah, of course not.
I look at everyone that is like, that's about the movement, whatever it is. So we did something here locally, which was, I believe that we made history. Myself and DJ John Blaze, I had this idea. I was like, we need to, it was during the SB 1070 bill that was signed.
I remember. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I was all like, Blaze, because Blaze just got off a tour with me with Raekwon on the Built for Cuban Links 2 tour. He just got off a tour with me. I'm still in mode, know, and I was like, Blaze, let's do our by the time I get to Arizona, let's do our remix.
Sure.
So I posted on social media, and shout out to Talib Kweli, but he reached out and said, I want to get on it. I said, Talib, I'm sorry. Even Immortal Technique, I said, I'm sorry, no. It's just going to be Arizona artists, because we're here in Arizona
having to deal with it.
We're having to deal with this. Sure. I need people need to hear what Arizona hip hop has to say.
Okay.
And some people will be like, and Talib ended up doing his own version. Okay. I think Immortal did his own version, but we got like over 10 hip hop artists, and we shot that in about a week. It went viral, and I think that's what hip hop, my honorable mention, as Farrakhan said,
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh, okay. Said that, one hip hop song is equivalent to 10,000 of his speeches.
I remember when he said that.
And that's how powerful hip hop is.
And I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yes.
So here's what we're gonna do.
Yes.
Now that we know who you are, let's take a break. We're going to come back. And the first thing I want to ask you about is the Indigenous Peoples Movement. That sound good?
Yep.
Okay, so stick around. We're coming back with more Civic Cipher right after this. If you're just tuning in to Civic Cipher, I'm your host, Ramses Ja. Big shout out to Q Ward, who is off this week. We are very fortunate in that our guest this week is the one and only Queen YoNasDa, activist extraordinaire, mover and shaker, national mover and shaker when it comes to, advancing the agenda for Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, you name it, right? You said it best. You said you're not Republican, you're not Democrat, you stand up for what's right. And I think that really does encapsulate you. So we're gonna hang out with her for a bit and talk more about what she has going on. Also, our Way Black History Fact. She's gonna give us her thoughts on the origins of the Indigenous Peoples Day in this country. But first, we are going to talk about becoming a better ally. This is our B.A.B.A segment, and I would love for you to let the listeners know how they can become better allies. Maybe it has to do with what you have going on in your world or some larger agenda, but I would love for you to take a couple minutes and let folks know.
Yeah, becoming a better ally is getting out of your comfort zone.
Sure.
I always say any time that a change is about to happen is when you're uncomfortable. And so getting out of your comfort zone of whatever community you're in, whatever clubs or whatever you're a part of, getting out of your comfort zone and to be able to figure out and hearing from another perspective and figuring out ways how you can be able to be of support if you agree with them or not. But I think it's important.
How can people support you directly?
Things change every day. And so just follow me on all social media platforms.
Sure.
Queen YoNasDa, Queen YoNasDa. I'm the only YoNasDa in the world. You put that in a Google search and you'll find me. But the reason why I say it always happens because I fight for what's right. Yeah. And so it's not just against police brutality. It's not just against oil pipelines. This past week in 1 week I raised $40,000 for the people of Louisiana by organizing a 10-city event called Hip Hop for NOLA. It was a continuance of what I've done before.
I watched you do that.
Yeah. And you saw when I posted it, right? Yeah. I said, anyone want to do a Hip Hop for NOLA to help the people?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then so it was 10 cities that reached out and said, yes, I want to do it. And we raised $40,000.
I love that.
All in 1 week.
So and you always do have these neat little things that you'll put on, and so I think that's awesome. Once again, let everyone know your social media.
Queen YoNasDa.
Perfect. Now let's talk about the Indigenous Peoples Movement. In your words, what is it?
Indigenous Peoples Movement is a coalition-based organization. We started in 2019 when we did the Indigenous Peoples March. I felt that it was important that not just Native Americans, but all Indigenous people of the world, that we come together and to bring awareness on what is happening amongst our communities. So we had people from all the various tribes here in the United States, but we had Black organizations, Black folks that came. We had people, the Amazons, the people from the Amazon flew in and came as well because they were fighting against the fires that was happening in the Amazon. We had people from all around the world, and it was a beautiful, beautiful. We even had Buddhist monks that came. It was like over 50 of them that came in that just came in solidarity, So it was just a beautiful, beautiful sight to see that I realized all of us are fighting the same fight.
Yeah.
All of us are fighting. We just are fighting for freedom, justice, and equality. It may be worded different, it may look different, but it's all the same, Sure. And we're fighting the same enemy, which is greed. We're fighting greed, and however that looks,
That's fair.
And so I wanted everyone to be able to see that. And the conclusion of that was, so we had about 20,000 people that came to Washington,
awesome.
D.C. This was also the weekend of the Women's March as well. We partnered with the Women's March for it. We had at the Lincoln Memorial.
Okay.
So we're on the steps on the day of Martin Luther King holiday
about
or
that?
birthday, on the steps of Lincoln Memorial, with not just Native American and not just Black people, but all people of the world, what Dr. Martin Luther King said on those steps, that all Gentiles and Jews, everyone come together. So the beauty of that was phenomenal. Then, so we ended it off with an amazing round dance. It was beautiful, and African drums and all of that. Just imagine African drums, Native drums, all happening at the same time. Sure. Then all of these young people came from with these MAGA hats. And while we're drumming, they came up, hey y'all, and making monkey sounds and making mockery of Elder Nathan Phillips and Keith's IMC, who was having the drums. And it ended up going viral. Nick Sandman, young, I believe 16 years old, went up to Nathan Phillips and the environment prior to him going up to them, but they were making mockery, they was making fun of everything that we just accomplished, and it was like over 100 young people, so it was very scary. But as Native people, we see this type of behavior at every sports game. We see this type of behavior at a Cleveland Indians game when they're doing the tomahawk chop. And they're coming dressed up as Native Americans. We see this type of behavior with just at a lot of our local games, being mascots. So for us as Natives, we're like, oh, here it go again. But what was so surprising to us was that when it hit the internet and it ended up going viral, and people were in disgust of this mockery, and we're like, oh wow. People are paying attention to what we've been seeing for over 400 or 500 years, just even in 90 years with the Washington Redskins, but you all act like this at every sports game, just making all this doing things like that, and so we were shocked. But then at the same token, we was like, wait, hold up, they got our back, and so we ended up creating Indigenous Peoples Movement and brought in over 200 other organizations. We have chapters in Australia, South America, Canada, even in Africa and the Caribbean. We have people from all across this globally.
Good.
And we're about at 500,000 followers all on social media.
So let me wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
I'm so happy. So let me make sure that we plug this.
Yes.
You championed I guess I would call it anti-voter suppression initiative for Indigenous peoples. This is one of the more recent things that you've done.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
So Standing Rock is my sister tribe.
Okay.
I helped Standing Rock raise $1.6 million for their legal defense fund when we was up in Standing Rock.
Excellent.
I helped Standing Rock a lot with a lot of different things. They was like, like I said, Indigenous Peoples Movement is a coalition base, and Standing Rock is also a part of that coalition.
Sure.
And was like, you know what? They was like, they're trying to stop our votes, because if you have a PO box, we can't register to vote. So we immediately went into action and petitions
on tribes. A lot of time, or on reservations, there's a lot of times
address.
PO boxes
PO
instead of
boxes.
addresses.
Yeah, because your address might be the cow of the third farm that you see on your left hand side.
Right.
That's my house.
Right.
It's not and then plus on top of it, we're a nation within a nation.
Yeah.
We have our own tribal government, police, everything. We govern ourselves.
Okay.
And so with that being said, but many of us want the opportunity. We have the right to vote, for a president. Because that president will be in relationship with our tribal president. So it's really important that we use that opportunity to vote for a president, a United States president, to work with our tribal president. So we love that opportunity to be able to have, but when it was suppressed, especially it got suppressed after the movement in Standing Rock, when they saw us when they saw us, so many of us, they're like, wait, hold up. Native Americans are rising up deep, and they're getting abused. I have lung cancer, and there has been over 100 people that have been diagnosed with with various forms of cancer since being in Standing Rock.
Wow.
I am working with Congresswoman Cori Bush, who is my sister in the movement, as well as some other politicians. She just put it out there to get information on what is in these canisters when they're spraying us with tear gas and all of that. What's the ingredients in there? Because, like I said, there's been 100 people, and some of them have already died from cancer.
Wait, I want to make sure I get this straight, and I'm following. You were tear gassed in Standing Rock.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please.
All of us were.
Okay.
And there has been cases of women that have been losing baby after baby after baby after baby since Standing Rock. So we believe that they sprayed us with some type of toxic gas, and I have it on videos of toxic gas that gave us long-term effects. And when I first saw the cancer on the CAT scan that I have in my lungs, it is over 200 cancer tumor cells in both of my lungs. It looks like my doctors thought it was asthma. They was like, it looks like you breathed something in. There's like, we've never seen cancer look like this. So they end up doing a biopsy, and they was like, this is angiocarcinoma. What the heck? They all spoke amongst each other like, this looks like she breathed this in.
Sure.
They never, because sometimes you see like, oh, there's a tumor here and a tumor there. I have over 200 cancer tumor cells in both of my lungs, and there's just all over, just everywhere. So we just lost LaDonna, whose land we was on in Standing Rock, till she had brain cancer. Her husband, he passed of cancer. We lost a veteran. Remember, there was a lot of veterans that came up there. He passed away of cancer, and so I'm waiting for the ingredients back, and then we're going to do a congressional hearing, very soon,
as you should,
on this. So so it's important, so voter suppression, all of this that happened in Standing Rock, that same year, they stopped. That governor in North Dakota was very upset with just how we rose up as Native people, against his pipeline. And he needed to suppress our vote because he knew that we would have voted him out. And as well as other governors and politicians that was for that oil pipeline. Because we mobilized like hell in Standing Rock. It was over 100,000 people. So that year we was like, oh yeah, we're voting these people out. So from that, Sharice Davids ended up becoming the first Native American Congresswoman. Deb Haaland ended up becoming the first Native American Congresswoman in that same year. So they knew what happens when we rise up and we vote. So
this full frontal on, there's been this movement to protect the black vote for a couple years now. I mean, it's a long-standing movement. Let me not misspeak.
Yeah.
But it, I guess, it has been reinvigorated in the past couple of years because there's been an active force on the right, specifically, to suppress the vote of melanated individuals in this country. That's perhaps as plainly as I can put it, and as simply without being wrong. And lately, I know that you're passionate about all these things, but the indigenous vote is something that needs a special type of protection. Because perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, this population might be especially vulnerable or vulnerable in different ways that folks may not have considered. So my question to you is, what are some other ways besides, the not sending a ballot to a P.O. box? What are some other ways that you've seen voter suppression manifested in those communities? And then I'll ask a follow-up question. What can individuals listening to your voice right now do on the ground to help offset that or to reverse that?
What we found out is that what I found out here in Arizona, especially on the reservations, a lot of them, so the polling places were closed early. And they know that natives live on a reservation. It's a long distance to get to go vote, and so closing early is another way of voting suppression.
Sure.
Another thing is in Atlanta, they're trying to stop voting on Sundays. That's
the souls to the polls.
Yep.
Right?
They're trying to stop voting on Sunday, and with the working class, Sundays we're off.
Yeah. Real quick. Souls to the polls. Just so that you know, if you're listening to us, is a movement to get churchgoers, primarily Black churchgoers, to, after church, go and cast their ballot. And this initiative to close the polls on Sundays is in direct response to that Souls to the Polls movement or initiative.
Yes.
Okay. Now please continue. I just want to make sure that the listeners are following us.
Yeah, most definitely. And then on top of it, what we saw in Atlanta, Georgia, was these long lines. And so as organizers, we go and give out food and we give out water, for those that's standing in these long lines. And they voted against us doing that we will be ticketed or we'll be jailed, arrested for giving out water and food, for people that are standing in line to vote, so it's really, it's a lot. And we have a lot of work to do, but in regards to what you were saying, the Native American vote, is, I would say, out of all of these swing states, it is the most important for the Native American vote, because of the fact that population can be able to swing those swing
states,
from one to the other, and to be able. So I think that it's important as organizers to go and talk to Native American communities and go door to door and talk about the problems that, not just asking what Native Americans are facing, but also educating on what's happening in the inner cities. See, Native American reservations are far from these cities. So, but the people that are that we constantly have to I would say work with or fight with or whatever, it's in the cities, but those that's on the reservations or away from the city, they're going to vote too. But they need to know what's happening in the cities. So going and educating on, like, did you know that this mayor wants X, Y, and Z, or are pushing for more untrained police officers, or whatever is happening on that level. So when they go and vote, on a federal level, they have an understanding of that it's a one voice situation.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a bit here, just because we've had to talk about it lately. We've discussed missing while Black. We've discussed what's referred to as missing white woman syndrome. But we mentioned it, Q and I mentioned on the show, that I was watching a movie. This might have been couple days ago, Netflix movie. And I think it's called Wind River, right?
Oh yeah.
And it has the guy from Hawkeye. He plays Hawkeye. I don't know his name, but really cool guy, I think. And he investigates, whatever a murder mystery on, I believe it to be a reservation, or they partner with Res Police or something like that in the movie. At the end of the movie, it puts a statistic up and it says, women go missing, this, that, and the third. But then it says, no one knows how many Native women have gone missing. The story's about a missing Native woman. At the end of the movie, it says, no one knows how many Native women are missing because the government hasn't kept track of them. And now that you're here, since we've talked about that, I wanted you to take a moment to discuss missing Native women. You know, I know you know some statistics. I know you know there's some passion with respect to that as well. So your thoughts.
So several years ago, I believe it was like 2008. I was organizing and I was reaching out to people in Canada, and it was a woman by the name of Kanahus that was educating me about the Highway of Tears. And I was like, what's the Highway of Tears? And she was like, she said, you go down this long highway and it's all of these pictures or, these just different memorials along this entire highway in Canada of all of the Native American women that have gone missing or that have been murdered.
Wow.
And I was like, what? It was so, and I was like, how are they going missing? What is this? She was like, man camps. And I was like, what's a man camp? And she was telling me, she was like, when they're building these tar sands, oil pipelines, mining.
That's what the movie was about. How about that?
Yeah. And all of these things around environmental, of them always trying to build something, take resources.
Sure.
While these white men, construction workers and workers, they create man camps, which is they are prostituting Native American women, because a lot of these places are near Native American communities.
Okay.
The over-sexualization of the Native American woman started with Pocahontas. Pocahontas was 12 years old. She was 12 years old. She was taken against her will. They took pictures of Pocahontas. When they went to England, and to try to get people from England to come to this new land, this new America, they was like, you could get you a Pocahontas too. Look at this beautiful young, Indian woman, and they was having pamphlets out of Pocahontas. They were sex trafficking. That was the first indication of sex trafficking of a young girl, which was Pocahontas. And we think it's entertainment with Disney making a cartoon of and the way that they made Pocahontas in the cartoon of a grown woman.
Yeah.
No, she was 11, 12 years old. She was a child that was taken. And so, and they dressed her up, and they and I believe, I don't know if they ever got her body back from England, but they dressed her up to make her as a spokesperson, of America.
Okay.
So when we're looking at today, fast forward, everyone wants their Pocahontas, and they do it by any means necessary in the most disgusting way, by kidnapping, by putting them into human trafficking and murdering them. And many of them have gone missing.
We have about a minute left.
Yes.
So in brief,
yes,
what is it that people can do to help? Maybe research. What are your thoughts? How can people
continue to push your local legislation to get to work on the federal level, but even on a statewide level, that when there is a missing, there has to be an Amber Alert for Native American young girls, and boys, and older that are missing, to take it seriously. The local law enforcement does not take it seriously at all. They think they run off. We think we have a problem within the Black community of Black women that have gone missing. There's over 50,000 of Black women have gone missing. It's the same amount with Native American women.
And they're a much smaller part of the population. Yes, so that makes a lot of sense.
Well,
I appreciate you sharing that. I know that that's very troubling, but also very necessary to talk about.
Yes.
And keeping in line with the theme, I did want to take a moment for today's Way Black History Fact to discuss the Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah.
And how that came about. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So what we do Today's article, I just pulled it from Wikipedia. Thought it was in line.
So I haven't read it yet, so I don't know what it is.
All good. So I'm going to read through it, and then we're just going to talk about it. So it's pretty simple. All right. So in 1990, the International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas, sponsored by the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, began to discuss replacing Columbus Day in the United States with a celebration to be known as Indigenous Peoples Day. Similarly, Native American groups staged a short protest in Boston instead of Thanksgiving, which has been celebrated to mark collaboration between Massachusetts colonists and Native Americans in the first years. In July 1990, the first Continental Conference on 500 Years of Indian Resistance in Quito, Ecuador, representatives of indigenous peoples throughout the Americas agreed that they would mark 1992, the 500th anniversary of the first voyages of Christopher Columbus, as a year to promote the continental unity and liberation. After the conference, the attendees from Northern California organized protests against the quincentennial jubilee that had been organized by the United States Congress for the San Francisco Bay Area on Columbus Day 1992. It was to include replicas of Columbus's ships sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge and reenacting their, quote, discovery of America. The delegates formed the Bay Area Indian Alliance and in turn the Resistance 500 Task Force. It promoted the idea that Columbus's discovery of inhabited lands and subsequent European colonization of them had resulted in the genocide of indigenous peoples because of the decisions which were made by colonial and national governments. In 1992, the group convinced the City Council of Berkeley, California to declare October 12th as a day of solidarity with indigenous people. And in 1992, the Year of Indigenous People. The city implemented related programs in schools, libraries, and museums. The city symbolically renamed Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day beginning in 1992 to protest the historical conquest of North America by Europeans and to call attention to the losses suffered by Native American peoples and their cultures through diseases, warfare, massacres, and forced assimilation. Get Lost Columbus, an opera by a Native American composer, White Cloud Wolfhawk, was produced that day. Berkeley has celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day ever since. Beginning in 1993, Berkeley has also held an annual powwow and festival on Indigenous Peoples Day. In the years following Berkeley's action, other local governments and institutions have either renamed or canceled Columbus Day, either to celebrate Native American history and cultures, to avoid celebrating Columbus and the European colonization of the Americas, or due to raise controversy over the legacy of Columbus. Several other California cities, including Richmond, Santa Cruz, Sebastopol, now celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and encourage people to donate to a neighboring tribe and recognize the trauma and pain indigenous peoples have been subjected to by colonizers. Last piece. At least 13 states do not celebrate Columbus Day: Alaska, Hawaii, Iowa, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oregon, South Dakota, Vermont, Washington, D.C., Wisconsin. South Dakota officially celebrates Native American Day instead. Various tribal governments in Oklahoma designate these days as Native American Day or have renamed the day after their own tribes. All right. Want to get your thoughts on that. That seems like a happy thing.
Oh, it's an amazing thing. I remember as a child that my mother took me to Alcatraz every October, you know, and seeing all of everyone, I mean, just really taking over Alcatraz. And so on October 11th, you know, once again, so many people are going to be taking over Alcatraz. When year before last, it was Colin Kaepernick came, so to continue to see that happen, New York City for the past 7 years have been taking over Randall's Island for Indigenous Peoples Day. So it's an amazing, beautiful thing to see. But we still have a long way to go. Of course. Because of the fact that, you know, so many Italian Americans believe and they fight hard in New York City, Chicago, that's in some other cities. The reason why it's still Christopher Columbus Day and not Indigenous Peoples Day is because Italian Americans really believe that Christopher Columbus discovered America, and they believe that throughout their Italian American history that Christopher Columbus was an amazing man, and they strongly believe that, even though it was documented from, you know, those that was with Christopher Columbus that said that we cannot be with this crazy man. This man is insane. He is, you know, I mean, it was his own people that was with him was like, you know, and On top of it, he was not a good man in Italy. So I don't understand why Italians Americans believe that this, they want to hold on so strong. And they actually really they come out and they come out and protest against us during that time when we're doing our events and all of that. And it's crazy to see. Yeah, it's very sad. They counteract everything that we do when we're wanting Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay, so one final thought from you. Got maybe about a minute left.
Yes.
So what do you think we should do to connect either old and young or across, different, cultural lines or whatever? What do you think that we can do to connect better? Someone as traveled as you might have some perspective that even I don't have. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think the best thing is to, once again, get out of our comfort zone, meaning out of our neighborhoods that we know, and going into another neighborhood and just learning. Some people are scared to go to the barrio when they're Black, or go to the reservation if they're Latino. I think it's important for us to, see what events are happening and learn from the people. Then I in my travels and organizing and going to all these cities and all of that, even though I believe I'm 42, 42, okay. I'm still a student of life.
Yeah, sure.
And I love sitting back and learning, from young people, from older people. When I went out to Miami, and I wanted to, it was a hurricane that happened. And I was like, you know what? I went there and I had the local organizer, reached out to local organizers. I happen to always know someone in the state. And I'm like, hey, can you get people in the room? And I just sat back and just listened to what's happening politically, socially, even musically and everything that's going on in Miami. I did the same thing in Detroit. And I will go there once a month and continue to learn and continue to be engaged and learn what's happening. And I always do that and sometimes I will keep going for a year and just learning, and so I think that it's important for us to learn what's happening. Learn what's happening, and you'll realize that the same things that's going on in your city is the same exact things that's happening in the next city.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that too. And, one thing that I will say is, for Q and I, we have kind of a unique opportunity with this show in that we have a network that spans from coast to coast.
Yeah.
A lot of voices that listen to this show that we thought was a good idea. The growth has very much felt empowering.
Yeah.
And both of us, I think in our heart of hearts, are love first.
Yeah.
A lot of folks can't see, but I'm very well tattooed, and I have a huge tattoo along my arm that says "I love you."
Yeah.
And something I learned from my father, who was a minister, perfect love casteth out fear. And so to live behind fear means that you probably need to work on your love or your capacity to love a little bit more. And that's what we try to do with this show. Obviously, that's what you do with, all of the activism and all of the speaking that you do.
I love our people. And that's what moves me. And I think that that's what moves you too.
Absolutely.
When you love God, and what everything God creates, you want to be there.
I love that.
Yeah.
And with that, I think that's going to do it for us. So once again, thank you for coming up, Queen YoNasDa, and thank you for
and I gotta give you your flowers. You have been doing this for such a long time, and you deserve every accolade, everything. But you really, really love our people.
Yes,
you really, really do, and it shows in everything that you do.
I'll take that.
Yes.
And with that, that's an even higher high. So we'll end it right there. Thank you for tuning in to Civic Cipher. Once again, I'm your host, Ramses Job. Be sure to check us out next week, and you can download this and any previous episode on civiccipher.com. And until next week, y'all, peace.